Welcome to the Action Podcast, produced by Action International Ministries. Our desire is to equip and encourage missionaries as they prepare for their time serving overseas and while they're on the field. We hope that this resource will be a blessing to you. For more information about Action, please visit us online at actioninternational.org. I'm sure that we've all heard some not-so-good stories when it comes to short-term missions. But thankfully, those are the exception and not the rule. The effect of short-term missions can have long-lasting effects for both the one going and the one receiving them. Amanda Bulkley, Action USA Mobilizer and Women's Short-Term Coordinator, and Kyle Hansen, Associate USA Director and USA Short-Term Program Coordinator, give valuable insight into the positive effect that serving short-term can have. Amanda, Kyle, thank you for taking the time to talk about something that we're all really passionate about, obviously, being a part of a mission organization, Action International, but talking about short-term missions, which we're all involved in to some degree, some more than others, right, in ministry with Action. But specifically, we're going to be talking about the long-term effects of short-term missions. And I think that's a really cool topic. That's a really cool episode to discuss. And we have some points here. We're going to be talking about the long-term effects for the short-termer, the one that's going to be going. And we have a few topics, a few things at the end that we're going to discuss. The long-term effects of the receiving missionary, the host missionary, the long-term worker, right, that's going to be receiving them on the field. So, yeah, let's just start going through some of these things and having this discussion about what some of the long-term effects for short-termers could be.
I think that one of the biggest things that we desire to see is short-termers becoming long-term workers, and it doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's really special. And I think that in thinking back of working with Action for 15 years now, one of our meetings with 30 of our leaders from around the world, at one point I was giving a presentation on short term and what was happening with our office and sending people, and I just asked for a show of hands of how many of you had gone on a short-term trip at some point, which was a pivotal point in your journey to long-term service, and almost everyone in the room raised their hands.
Yeah.
And
so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think for our listeners, for our watchers, I would encourage you to think of your own story. If you're on the field now, or if you're preparing to go to the field, did you have one of those short-term experiences that led you down that path as well?
Yeah, I would say even in my last 4 years, just working with Action, we've had 3 short-term workers go long-term, 2 with Action and 1 with a different organization that we got to help her find that was a good fit. And then we have someone going through orientation with Action who served with us short-term 2 years ago this upcoming fall. So even just in the past 4 years, it's been so cool to see the Lord just bring that into fruition in people's hearts and help walk them through the process. And yeah, it really is special. That's a good word for it.
Yeah, and I think what's hard, when we think about short-term missions, sometimes we immediately think of those negative instances or when it didn't work out, right? And we all have stories about that, but thankfully it's not the exception, it's not the rule, it's the exception, right? And doesn't happen often. And I think we're all thankful for that there are more success stories when it comes to short-term missions, whether it's teams going from churches or individuals or interns going as a part of their college requirement, right? It's more common that people come back with great stories, positive testimonies, and what God has been doing in the nation. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
That's really exciting.
And that really does remind me of another long-term effect of short-term ministry, which is seeing people become lifelong mission mobilizers, not just for any particular organization, but for the nations in the kingdom generally. I have just seen so many interns come back with those stories, those powerful stories and those passions, and go to their circles, their family, friends, colleges, churches, and share those things that really impacted them, and just see that passion spread. So many interns have told me, the effect on their family or the effect on their churches. But one specific story I'm thinking of recently is a girl who just served at our USA office. I was talking to her about her time serving with us the previous year in Colombia. And she said that she came back from her trip and was talking to a roommate, and a roommate said, "Oh, well, if you can serve somewhere, I think I can too."
Wow.
So even just the power of, my friend or my family member went out and did this thing, and even though it might be scary to me or something that I'm intimidated by, someone I love just did this and absolutely enjoyed it so much, got to use their gifts. And so if they can do it, I can do it too. And just kind of taking the intimidation out of the process and normalizing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people might have that apprehension, right? Thinking about a short-term trip or what's involved in that. They might not feel they're ready or whatnot. But yeah, action does help a lot. We help as an organization. There are a lot of organizations that help prepare people well. Action's not the only one. But it is cool to be a part of an organization like Action that helps prepare people well, to take that fear factor out of it, and to let them know that this is something that anybody can do, and whether it's long-term service in the future for that short-termer, God will work that out. But taking like you said, Kyle, having everybody raise their hand in that room, almost everybody raise their hand, that's powerful. It shows that there is this place of short-term missions, and I think, honestly, for me, I think everybody should experience it, and go on one trip at least, and just take that step.
Totally. I so agree. I think also with Action, something we really want to see people do is step into the giftings that God's given them. So everyone's called to the Great Commission, but within that calling, how are you gifted? And when these interns use their giftings and step out in obedience to the Great Commission, like into the nations using those gifts, I mean, they just come alive. Whether they're supposed to do that long term or not, using your gifts to serve the global church just makes you come alive, because that's what you were born to do. So that's also a really fun thing to see people step into.
A story I thought about regarding this point was we had sent an intern to Nepal for 7 weeks. He was a seminary student, and you're talking about people being intimidated. He was not. He's like, I'll go wherever. I'll go trekking into the Himalayas, and you go on some of these roads where you look down and it's a 200-foot drop, and you're like, all right, Lord, I'm trusting you that we'll make it through this. But he went and spent that time with 5 or 6 of our families there who serve in Nepal. And was so inspired, he heard their stories. He wrote 6-7 pages, single-spaced, just about exactly what they're doing, their needs, how others could come alongside them and serve, how they potentially could support them. And thinking of him, he's now probably finished with seminary, starting in the pastorate. I imagine that experience that he had preaching, in the Himalayas will affect him the rest of his life, and will affect his ministry and how he thinks about how can my church be a missions-minded church going forward, focused on working and sending among unreached peoples and elsewhere. I actually took that document that he had written, and I've shared it with others, and I shared it with a guy just a couple months ago who also would like to go to Nepal. He read it. He wrote me, this is an ex-Marine, and he wrote me, he said, I was in tears as I read of what was happening and what is happening with Action in Nepal and what people are doing. And so he's planning to go himself on a vision trip, hoping maybe for long-term service down the road.
So cool.
One other thing with his story, the seminary student that went, it's pretty interesting. Doesn't always happen, but our Action Nepal director, his son was looking to go to some sort of Bible college in the States, and so through the intern that we sent, he helped connect him to the school where he was getting his seminary degree. Our director's son got accepted, and his plan is to come this fall for school. So you just don't know what will happen coming out of one short-term trip.
Kind of going off that, right? The church, helping the church engage in missions, that there is that long-term effect for not just the short-termer, but that ripple effect, right? As that short-termer comes back, shares their stories for their family, for their friends, for their roommates, right? For people within their church body. But I want to talk about that, right? What is the effect that that short-termer and their experience can have on their local church? What are some ripple effects within their church body that could happen as a result of that member coming back from serving overseas?
I think there's a lot of different things that can happen and have happened. One story I specifically think of is a nursing student that we had from Ohio go serve on a team in the Philippines. And, we train for teams differently than we train for individuals. Individuals is a lot of one-on-one discipleship time. Team is a lot of, especially if we're setting them from a college, working with their professors and helping them to disciple their team well so that they can go well. So it's a different type of equipping. So I didn't spend much time with this intern before she got when she went to the field. But when she got back, she just asked for a couple individual debriefs with me and then the head of our church mobilization. And so we all met together multiple times, and she just said, I just have this desire to see my church understand God's heart for the nations, and it's just not something that we're doing. It's not a part of our children's ministry, our youth ministry, college, nothing. We don't talk about the Great Commission. What do I do? I'm just graduating college. What's my influence here? What do I do? And so we just got to spend a couple hours, with her, talking her through, okay, what does it look like to talk to your pastor? What does it look like just to share your stories that you've experienced and what God's doing in your heart? And so she did. She sat down with her pastor, and he said, wow, I'm loving what you're saying. I think this is such a good conviction. Let's just start by making this a part of our VBS this summer.
Wow.
And so it was themes of their VBS, overseas missions and giving to overseas missions. And then they started to see it trickle into their children's ministry and then their young adult ministry. And I check in with her a couple months later. She's like, Amanda, you won't believe how it's growing. It's amazing. Awesome. A year later, Amanda, it's a part of our church. It's just a part of how we do things. And I think that story is amazing because here she is saying, what can I do? I'm just one person. I'm right out of college. Who will listen to me? And the Lord says, it's my voice and my power and my stories. Just share them. And I'm doing work, through you. And so she stepped out. She had those conversations, and the Lord really did change that church to be molded to reflect his heart more for the nations.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think when we get saved, right? We have that passion for Christ, and we're so like red hot on fire for the Lord, right? And we just want everyone to know. And it is a responsibility that we have, right? That we are ambassadors of Christ. We are to share what God has done in our life, how he's transformed us. And I think that's the same with a short-term missions trip. Yeah. When we go and experience these things and our eyes are open, our perspective is changed, we see God and Jesus Christ moving mightily in these nations, right? And through these people, we're worshiping with them. We're seeing some awesome things happen. And we come back to our home country, to our home church. Yeah. We have a responsibility and a duty, I think, to share that experience with people and to ignite their heart for the nations. God is about the nations, right? We see that Genesis to Revelation, the entire Bible. It's God's heartbeat for the nations and his redemptive plan to save man of all nations, tribes, and tongue. So, I think that's important. And for her to do that, that's brave. Yeah. Especially sitting down with your pastor who's been to seminary and everything, and you're fresh out of college. She was brave to do that. Yeah. But I feel like we should all be doing that. Even us. We've been with Action for years, right? Yeah. But we should continue to maintain that within our local churches and encourage people to step out.
Yeah, and how humble of that pastor to receive the heart of that college girl and say, oh my gosh, you're right. Yeah. So cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that speaks a lot to him. It doesn't happen often, right?
Adam, I like your story about your local church and some of the trips that you went on one and then you inspired another and did training. Maybe you would share a little bit about that.
I think, I was saved in that church at 12 and grew up in that church. I was a homegrown missionary, sent out, and just having that passion for missions. When you've experienced that and you've gone on a trip, you just want everyone to experience that. And again, whether they go long-term or not, just to go on a short-term trip and experience that is really, huge in your walk with the Lord. Our church, because of COVID, things had shut down, and we were now back off the field serving from the Philippines. And I thought, man, I'd love to see the church get back to going on these short-term trips. And there was another elder that partnered with me to get things going and kick that off. The elder board was all excited. The pastors were excited. And we started just through action and our contacts in Honduras, just started working this plan out. And like you said, Amanda, it is different training somebody and equipping and preparing an individual versus a team.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very different. Because you got to talk about team dynamics.
Yeah.
You got to work well as a team and know each other well before you go out.
Right.
So that was challenging, but it was really awesome, and it was really rewarding and eye-opening for everybody. But it was really cool to be used by God to help the church get back to going on short-term trips.
Yeah.
Now we have built that relationship with Honduras. And the church is excited. The church is really excited, and more people, not just me, that Adam going as a missionary, but other people for the first time being afraid to go on a trip and then coming back and saying, wow, I had no reason to be afraid. I had no reason to be fearful.
Yeah.
God was with me, and I had a powerful experience, and I met the Lord. So that was just really neat to see. We can be used in our local church to awaken that, to ignite that,
Yes.
to continue to stir that passion and desire for the nations. So, yeah, it's important, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's the same for those watching this, listening to this. You can, if you're a missionary currently, or you're preparing to go, you can do the same thing in your local church and be able to talk with others, either to have them come and serve with you, or maybe to go elsewhere as you're preparing or as you're on home assignment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also, that just brings to mind, there's times where I think we come back from short-term trips, or that's been a big part of our testimony and things like that, and we meet people and we're sensing, I think the Lord's calling them into something.
Yeah.
I think the Lord is calling them into some short-term trip. And for me, a couple of years ago, this happened where I lived in Dallas, Texas at the time, and I was attending a big church with a big young adult ministry. And all these young adults that I met were on fire for the Lord and serving Him in their community, sharing Him in their community, but had never stepped foot outside of the U.S. At all, or even just to do a missions trip. And I'm like, Lord, what do you want me to do here? Because the church had short-term trips, so, I encouraged them to go on those, and they didn't work with their work schedule, or they didn't work with their family trips or whatever. And I'm like, Lord, what are you calling me to do? Because it was just these groups of people that had never been. And so I'm praying through it, I'm thinking through it, and I asked my husband, what do you think about leading a team somewhere with Action? And we each just kind of brainstormed a couple names of people that we knew that the Lord was calling into these things. And my husband himself had never really been on an overseas mission trip. So we got a group of our friends together, some finance bros from Dallas, some nurses, just a random group. And we went together on this trip, and it really was an eye-opening event for a lot of people. One specific girl who had never been on an overseas mission trip came back and was just, so moved, and had a list of maybe 5 to 10 people herself that she was like, I am going to do the same thing. I'm going to take a group of my friends who have never been on a trip. So we trained her how to lead a trip, and she also led a trip with Action and brought a group of her friends who had never been on a trip. And that group also included a group of people from a Spanish-speaking church in Dallas, and their church had not been involved in a lot of overseas ministry.
Yeah.
And so now that church is gaining vision, and that church has people who are like, I want to take people from my circle that have never been on a long-term trip. So just the multiplication effect of, even though if the Lord is putting on your heart, I should share about this with this person, or I should encourage this person to go, you just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, there's obedience in going, and then there's obedience in sharing that, right? And the ripple effects of that experience.
Like there's a responsibility almost of coming back, and I think we've talked about it over the years of like stewarding.
Yes.
The stories that you hear from the field
right.
and your experience, and being able to use that to pour into others and share and encourage them to consider going.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and there's just so much spiritual growth and personal transformation that happens as a long-term effect of a short-term trip.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because there is that element of of discipleship that you guys especially, for debriefing when you meet with short-termers after they come back from that experience and you help them process through those things. Mm-hmm. But then it can take months or even years for things to really settle in, right? For those experiences. And it's like a year or two down the road, something happens. You're like, wow, that's something that maybe was ignited years ago during my short-term trip. But what have you guys seen as you've met with short-termers that came back from the field and as you debrief with them about their time? What are those stories that you have heard, those transformation stories that you have experienced with the short-termers that came back?
Yeah, I would back up just a little bit, but just to say that we have a leader who likes to say that if you take an international trip, like it doesn't mean getting on a plane and traveling 12 hours and arriving somewhere 30 hours and arriving somewhere is going to make you a great disciple maker or disciplined Bible reader or prayer warrior, right? We really emphasize trying to train and prepare people and hope that their local church is doing that as well before they go. But I think that when people go to the field and they're prepared, but they come into a spot where they're outside of their comfort zone, when they're seeing real spiritual need, real physical needs, it can impact them in deep ways where they say, I just didn't know of the level of need, both physically and spiritually in this place. And so it can challenge them to be more of a prayer warrior and read more and understand more about the nations and what's going on and ways that they can either help themselves when they come back and be an advocate or go, whatever that might look like in their context.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. So what have you seen, Amanda, with some stories that, of people that have come back and maybe something that they told you, like, man, I wasn't expecting this to happen, or maybe an eye-opening thing that, or just in general, as you work with the women coming back, this is by and large what the reaction is.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has such different reactions, but I mean, the general consensus is my life will not be the same. Yeah. I think that's every single person I talk to, that's something that they say. My life will never be the same because of what they've seen, because of what they've encountered and seen. I think also people have a small understanding in their circle of what the Lord can do, because we tend to put the Lord in a box if we're living in the same place our whole life, in the same community, same circles. And then we go outside of that and we see the Lord working in the global church in different cultures and contexts, and we say, oh, God is so much bigger. And so even like prayer life will change a ton and what they can ask from the Lord or even expect God because of God's character in the Bible. Like just understanding who God is. Something I like to ask when people come back is, God's heart and his character is really reflected differently in a lot of different cultures around the world. So what's something new that you learned about and learned to trust about God's character in the culture that you're working in? And always such cool answers. And a lot of them really basic gospel truths. Yeah. They just all come out in a different way. Yeah. A couple specific stories that I'm thinking of. One girl, my first ever intern, came back from the field and was in school for nursing, but ultimately wanted to be a midwife. Went and served the next year in a really, really, really hard location. And I thought to myself, because her first year was in the Philippines, somewhere where action is really well known and somewhere where she could have a lot of contacts, things like that. Yeah. Then she went into the middle of the jungle. And I thought to myself, oh, this will really be telling to see, if this is something she wants to do in the future. She comes back more sure than ever. Wow. And is like, I actually preferred that context. Wow. Then the next year went to North Africa, really, really hard place to do work. Comes back more sure than ever, more confident than ever, and is living now in California, but hoping and to serve overseas, but really understanding that she can go into those hard places. Yep. She can go anywhere and see the Lord work and trust the Lord in it. Like she went to the depths of hard places.
That's awesome.
For a short period of time. Yeah. But came back saying, I know that the Lord can get me through hard times. I've seen the Lord be faithful to these families that are serving. I've seen the Lord be faithful to these ministries. So that's a really cool story I'm thinking of. Another one is I've had so many girls come back and say, hey, can you can we talk for the next year?
Wow.
And meet every 2 to 3 months and talk about what it looks like to flesh out this calling, because I have
Nice.
no idea what's next, but I know this needs to be a part of my future.
That's awesome.
And so we just walk, step by step. And another intern I hadn't talked to in over a year, we did a couple debriefs together, just reached out and said, I'm starting to really question my faith. I just graduated college. I know that Jesus is real. I know he's Savior and Lord.
Yeah.
But there's parts where I'm just confused about.
Yep.
And can we meet back up and talk about that?
That's great.
And so even just like, the continued relationship
Yeah,
that comes from
they would
this
reach out to you.
Yeah. I mean, I think as a short-termer, if I was listening to this and thinking, why should I go on short-term missions, I would think, one, because of the spiritual transformation and growth, but
Yeah.
two, because of the connections you get to make with people
Yeah.
all around the world, three, because of all the things you get to learn about the Lord, and really because you're getting to pour out ultimately.
Yes.
But I just think there's so many things that can come up from these trips that are beneficial for an eternal time, not
Yeah.
just for this lifetime.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah.
I was thinking a little bit. Before I started with Action, I was in China teaching English for about a year, and while there, I was one of 30 teachers from a variety of different U.S. states, a few different countries, certainly different theological backgrounds. It was very interdenominational, and so because of that, it really forced me to think through why I believed certain doctrines, and to dive deeper and have healthy conversations with others that disagreed, right? Just to learn and grow spiritually and personally in that. And even, we were teaching, and so people with different teaching styles, there's other skills and life lessons and ways that you can develop your own abilities to serve in your local church or in your profession while overseas.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I think for me, when I look at, those short-term trips that I took before becoming a career long-term missionary, it's easy to love the people in your circle, right? But sometimes it's hard to love people outside of that circle that are harder to love, right? But going on those short-term trips gave me a love for just people, all people. And coming back off those trips, and especially after serving long-term in the Philippines for 13 years, coming back in 2020, I felt like my love for people was just greater. I felt like I could love people better, love people easier, and seeing them as these are God's people, right? And it expanded my love for God's people, not just the nations, but even back home now in my home country, the U.S., just loving people that are outside the circle that I usually love well, and just to love people, it kind of expanded that view and that desire to do that. So I think that could also help for short-termers when they come back. They just increase their love for people. In general.
And I think too, just like love for the way that God made the church. Like we're all different parts of the body, right? And I always tell people when they come back, I'm like, what did you enjoy and what did you not enjoy? Like we're going to do things we don't enjoy in life. That just happens to serve the Lord in the kingdom. But he did make us a specific way. And so what do you enjoy doing? And it's so fun to hear their thoughts. Well, actually, I enjoyed this more than I thought I would. And I actually think this aligns with my gifting and something I learned. Or, man, I thought I would enjoy this and this was rough for me. And just kind of talking them through, okay, well, let's not reinvent the wheel and tell ourselves like we have to be the one to do all these things in the church. Let's look around and say who's gifted in that and how can we build them up to do that thing, and then you do the thing that you're gifted in and you do that well, and not trying to fill every gap. Sometimes we need to in ministry, and sometimes that just is the need. But what do you enjoy, and what is your part in the body, and what is not, and that's okay.
That's right. Well, that's a lot of things, right? But those are good things about the long-term effect that can have for the short-termer, for the one going. So transitioning now into the long-term effects for the long-term worker, for the career missionary serving overseas that will be receiving these short-termers, what are some positive long-term effects that can have as they host somebody on the field?
Yeah, I think one we talked about was especially for an intern coming, to work with you for a month or 2, 3, 4, up to maybe 6 months, the person coming can be a disciple that you can pour into. And I think when you're discipling somebody or when you're teaching a class or preparing a message of some sort, you're always learning yourself and preparing your heart to do that well, so that others will grow. And so with someone coming to work with you, that's a process you'd be going through that could lead to your own spiritual growth and benefit as you're preparing to receive them. I think for people that have kids on the field that are receiving a short-termer, there could be kind of the trickle-down effect of having, we send interns of all ages, but the majority that we send are college age or young adults. And so a trickle-down effect could be having a 20-something come and live with you for 3 months on the field with your family and be able to pour into your kids and love on them well and point them to Christ and encourage them to continue in their faith and growth and even pursuit of missions and what the family is already doing. So those are a few things maybe to start.
That's really good. Adam, I think that you have a really awesome story about this by God's grace with someone that came to serve with you. Do you want to share?
I think the hard thing is you have a ministry, right? You have a ministry, you're running a ministry, and then to think about an intern coming or a short-termer coming, at first it's overwhelming to think of. And then, Kyle, you're saying, disciple them. It's like, man, I don't have time to run the ministry, let alone host a short-termer and disciple them. However, I'm thankful that God allowed this guy Jason to come out for 3 months to do an internship, and I did, by God's grace, work hard to take time out of my schedule, running a ministry in the Philippines, to disciple him and to challenge him. I challenged him. I said, "Man, do you think that maybe God is calling you to do this or something like this long term?" And I challenged him pretty early on, like after 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And then he thought, yeah, maybe, I got to process this a little bit. But throughout his 3 months, he prayed that prayer to God, specifically like, okay, God, is this something that you want me to do? And he said, Adam, if you didn't challenge me to pray that prayer and seek God about that, I wouldn't have thought of that. I would have thought, this is just a 3-month commitment, and then I'm going home. I did my short-term trip. Yeah. So after the 3 months, he said, I think God is calling me to do this. And so he went back to his home country and raised support and went back to the Philippines and essentially took over that ministry from me because we had come back to the States. So, God used that. But at first, in my mind, I'm thinking, how can I take the time to do this? But God can. God can give you the time, and with his strength and power, he can help you take that break or just manage your time differently to invest in that short-termer. And there's great fruit. And whether they come back and be a part of your ministry or commit to long-term or not, they're going to be an advocate for you and for your ministry and potentially even help you fundraise and support. But they'll be a lifelong partner in ministry, which is a good effect of it as well.
That's so true. I have a question for you about that. What was it about him? What stood out about him that made you ask that question? Or was it just something that was on your heart to ask before he even got there?
I think it was already on my heart to challenge him, but I could see his gifting, right? And you had alluded to that, right? What is your gifting? We all should be involved in the Great Commission to some level and degree. But I saw his flexibility. I saw his love for people. He adapted well. He had joy as he was serving. And I knew no matter what he was going to do in life, for ministry or secular job work, whatever, that he just had joy. He exuded that joy, and it came out of him. But I saw his gifting, and I saw that he had a place, there in a ministry that he could plug into. And so I just boldly and bluntly challenge him to pray that. So that's kind of, I think we need to do that. We need to challenge people. We need to challenge people to step out. maybe it's something that they wouldn't have considered. And whether it's from the Lord or not, challenge them. And between them and the Lord, they pursue that conversation with God and see if, the Lord is really leading them to do it. So, discipling them, investing in them, and then seeing what God will do in the long term. But, I think what's the benefit for the career missionary, right? What's the benefit in discipling them beyond them becoming a long-term worker themselves? Is there anything that is going to be an investment for them as a career missionary? What's the benefit? How does it help them? Because I think there's also transformation that could happen in the life of the one as a discipler.
Yeah, well, my mind was going toward as well, if they're there to serve, obviously those you're ministering to, right?
Yeah.
So they're plugging in with college students or high school students or adults, whatever the context. You could see more fruit for the long-termer in their long-term investment in what they're trying to do in where they're serving, with the help of someone else being a spark plug, coming in, hopefully with energy and passion, different perspectives, different relational skills or spiritual gifts to serve, that would ultimately serve, obviously, the people that the long-termer is serving, and in the process being a benefit for that long-term worker or couple or team.
Right.
As
so good.
As people are impacted.
Yeah.
It's like bridging relationships almost that maybe wouldn't have formed or are forming, but just bridging it in a different way by using different gifts and different opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought of it like sometimes we have a couple in their early 30s and maybe they receive like a pastor who comes in just for a couple of weeks or something to serve with them, who can invest actually in them and disciple them in certain ways, which could be helpful. Or other times we have veteran workers in their 50s or 60s and they have somebody younger who can connect in different ways. And so there's just those relationships that maybe otherwise wouldn't form or need a little help that could happen with people coming.
Yeah, that reminds me of an intern who went somewhere to do a teaching internship and serve in a teaching setting, but she also had gifts in gardening and growing things, and she actually built a community garden in this really small village while she was there and taught the people in the village how to garden, and actually became a really cool ministry for the long-term workers, and also provided food source for a village that needed it. So it was a really cool, sustainable, continuing ministry that they didn't think of themselves or have the skills to know how to start. So that was a really cool story.
That's awesome. What about being a part of casting vision, right? And the ministry of hosting a short-term worker in that sense, helping them cast that kind of vision. I mean, you're going to be having somebody and hosting somebody with a different perspective, right? Someone coming out that might see things with fresh eyes, right? It might be a little challenging to maybe accept maybe what they would have for feedback, right? But how could that help the career long-term worker in their ministry for casting vision? Yeah,
I thought of it a little bit just in terms of how it helps a short-term worker, and I think there's always it could be beneficial to both sides. But I've learned over the years with Action and talking with other organizations that generally the best recruiters of other long-term missionaries are long-term missionaries, like those on the field doing it, or those here full-time mobilizing, and so they have I think the long-term worker has a very unique role in doing that, because they can give a front row seat to a short-termer of like, hey, this is what it's like, and these are the challenges, but these are the joys, and this is what we see the Lord doing, and sometimes it's fruitful ministry, and sometimes it's a desert, and we just trudge along and pray, and have to keep going forward.
Right.
But there can be that handing off of like, this is what the calling looks like to come and serve.
Right.
In a place like this or wherever the Lord might have you go.
Well, it's kind of neat to think of a long-term worker, whoever's watching this, that's a long-term worker and listening to this podcast episode, that they could be a part, right? God could use them to be a part of shaping the calling. And it sounds intimidating, but it's really not, because it's God, and the pressure's off because it's not about you. It's what God is doing. But you could be a part, an integral part, one of those small hinge moments on a big door of that's swinging in the life of this short-term missionary going out. God can use you.
I do think too, there's something to the scripture of that God has every day of your life written out. And if there's an intern before you in one of those days, it's seeing that as a ministry that God has for you too. So, when you're support racing to go on the field, that's a ministry and a season of ministry in itself before you even get to the field to do that season of ministry. And so when we have a short-termer in front of us, what does it look like to see that as a ministry in itself and devote an energy and a respect almost to the fact that God put this person in front of you for those days? And how do we store that well? And so, on top of it being maybe an overwhelming thought, it's also something that God will specifically equip you for, because it's part of the days that he's given you. And he does, equip us for the people that we come in contact with in ministry. And this is not different. And so I have seen that a lot with long-term workers, even doing debriefs. We often do debriefs with long-term ministries and workers after short-termers get back. And something that they say a lot is that, the Lord really aligned this. Our personalities click so well, or this part of my story really did resonate with that intern, and I felt really able to disciple them well because of that, or whatever it is. So the Lord does just so specifically equip.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what's this last kind of point that we have on this is that person that came out now goes back as an advocate for missions, right? Praying through what maybe God would have for them, for their life, whether it's to serve long-term or just to be a missions advocate in their home church, in their home sphere of influence, but potentially become a ministry partner for that long-term worker, right? Helping maybe even fundraise and get the need out. They've experienced something, right? They have seen something that people at their church and their friends and family haven't experienced. So as they share that, they could potentially be a ministry partner and help fundraise for that ministry. So I think that's a good effect, right? That's a good long-term effect. So it could be an advantage to the long-termer, the long-term missionary hosting a short-termer.
Yeah, and I mean, like Kyle was saying, great recruiters for sending other people to meet short-term needs. A person that comes to mind is I was on the phone with a long-term worker, a missionary, who was on furlough a couple months ago, and we were talking about the ministry that she was a part of in Greece and how she's hoping to move to somewhere in the Middle East moving forward, and she's raising support for that. And she said, your office, Action, you guys had a guy call you randomly out of the blue and just say, hey, I really want to see what this ministry in Greece is like. I'm going to be in Greece for a couple of days, and I really want to stop by and see what this is like. And she was like, that didn't excite me. I didn't want to spend my day showing this guy around. But I did it because I felt like, this is something the Lord wants, and I just want him to understand the ministry that's going on and to see what God's doing. And she said it actually was a really good day. It was a great time with this guy, and he ultimately left, and he started supporting me. She said I was shocked. I was so shocked. And she said, but the biggest shock of all is as I came back and I sent out a newsletter to just a group of people that were on my email list. He wanted to be on my email list. He said, I'm so excited for what you're about to do in the Middle East. Not only do I want to be a part of it, but I want to tell everyone I know about it and invite them, my church community, my friends, into this too. And she said, I was just shocked about that. I met him one time, but the Lord was working in his heart to be a part of this in a way that I could never have expected or imagined. And even just his heart for the people that she was serving in both contexts to know Jesus. I mean, him not only contributing financially and getting other people involved and mobilizing people to be a part of this ministry, but also just his heart for prayer and having that supporter, that you can count on for prayer, and especially a short-term who's seen your ministry.
That's right.
To know that, when you ask them for prayer, they see the context. They've been to the context of what you're talking about. So I just think there's some really cool stories about that. But that's just one.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't happen every time with
Right.
every intern. But we do on our debrief form, when people come back, have a question that essentially says, would you like to begin to start to support a long-term worker or
Yeah.
missions? And there's options. It's not like the specific person you just served.
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of like a write-in thing where they could say, oh yeah, this person, or
Yep.
it could be somebody in their church
Yeah.
who's on mission. But I think that's helpful, and we usually we get those forms and we talk with the intern about them.
Yeah.
And so like a story that came to mind for me with this was just thinking of an intern that we sent to Ukraine. This was like 3 or 4 years ago, who went to work with vulnerable women and children, with one of our long-term workers who's been there for 15, 20 years, who was under-supported, and she had a great internship, and she came back to her Ukrainian church in the States, told them about the need and the ministry, and they actually picked up that worker, the action worker in Ukraine, and began supporting her monthly. And
Wow.
so, it's just really neat when those things do happen, and when God moves in that way. And there's, I think, with short-term teams or with interns, those things can result.
Yeah. And I mean, all the stories that we've talked about thus
Yeah.
far, I mean, there's just eternal impact that comes from these trips
Yes,
into churches
right.
that they come back to, into colleges, into friendships. So yeah, it's great too, because it's sowing eternal seeds. It's
That's
not
right.
a waste of time.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, there's so much to say on these things, on this topic, but I think that we did a pretty good job of giving some talking points for both sides, right? For the long-term effects of the short-termer, the one going, and the long-term effects of the one that is hosting that short-termer. So thanks for taking the time to talk through these things.
Yeah.
They matter to God. They matter to us. And we're involved in an organization that these things do matter. So thanks.
Yay.
Thank you.